Today we have Deidre Johnson back for her fourth session in Cultivating Civil Community in an Age of Incivility. And recently I learned that she is an author of a textbook that has been used in many colleges and universities called The Art and Science of Persuasion. And she has a new book coming out with a long title. I have to read it because it's so long I can't quite remember it. The Wily Handbook for Online Collaborative Learning and Global Engagement. You'll learn from what she has to say today that she has traveled widely and has become well acquainted with intercultural and interfaith kinds of communication skills. Deidre, take it.
Thank you so much, Judy. Good morning, HASP. It's great to see you on this Monday morning. I'm going to go ahead and share screen with you, and we will go ahead and dive into our material. I want to do a little bit of review from last time. Hold on just a minute while my slides catch up with me. Isn't technology fun? So we are in the fourth part of a 5-week series. And so today we're going to lean into an idea of wisdom to question and faith in uncertainty. So wisdom to question and faith in uncertainty, and why, if we are really going to cultivate and create a culture of civility, that this is so incredibly important to that cultivation of a culture of civility, of the wisdom to question faith in uncertainty. But before we dive into our material for today, I want to briefly give you just a very quick summary from last time. We covered a lot of material. I gave you 10, and I probably should have limited it to 5, but I like all of them, so I couldn't part with any of them. But I talked about 10 ways to lean into conflict, and this idea that conflict, we can reframe it as something constructive, that something is beneficial. It's a source of growth and learning for us. So rather than saying, oh, my goodness, this makes me so uncomfortable, I have to run away and hide because there's conflict or there's tension around this particular issue with this particular group of people or this particular person, we can say, okay, how do I lean into this, and how do I actually learn from this? That it can be a signal for us to learn. So we talked about a number of different strategies. I'm going to fly through these again just so that you see them all in front of you, and then we'll address any questions before we go into today's material. We talked about several strategies that have to do with setting a mindset before you engage with a person or group with whom there is tension or misunderstanding. And one of those mindsets is to think about identity threats. Has your identity been threatened? Is that why you are so angry and irritated in this situation? Has the other person or group's identity been threatened? And we talked about 3 aspects of identity threats that are responsible for the vast majority of conflict and misunderstandings that we encounter. And those are a threat to our competence. Somebody is saying that we're not competent. They're saying that we're not a good and moral person, or they're saying that we are not lovable. We don't have any social worth. Okay, so we're incompetent, we're not morally good, or we are not lovable. So those identity threats are the source of many of our conflicts. Another thing as a mindset is to think about the impact of the situation on the other person or group before you ever start to justify your own intentions in this situation. So if somebody is injured and bleeding, you don't first analyze why the car did or didn't stop, you tend to the wound. And so we have to think about the same way when we enter a conflict. The other person or group is hurting, just as you are likely hurting. And so you have to tend to that wound. How do I address the wound, the impact of this, and not denying it, saying, oh, they shouldn't be hurt, they shouldn't be bleeding, silly person, why are they bleeding, why are they hurt? We don't do that when somebody's physically hurt or bleeding. We shouldn't do it when they're psychologically, emotionally hurt or bleeding either. So we tend to the wound first, and then perhaps we can discuss our intentions. But our tendency is to justify our intentions first. We talked about a third path, finding that third path in conflict. We taught to think about the parable of Jesus and the woman who was caught in adultery and was being stoned, that rather than siding with the crowd or with the woman, where's a third path that transcends both of those? So you're not taking one side or the other, but you're finding this third point in like a three-dimensional space. Sometimes you can think about of looking at the conflict like an objective observer, where you're in this bird's eye view position and you're looking at yourself as a subject, as a character, as an actor in this conflict, but not as yourself, but you're looking at yourself from a distance, from a perspective. Sometimes that can help us get to that third path. Fourth mindset thing that we want to think about is mutual contributions. In any conflict, we want to blame other people. It's all their fault. It's entirely their fault, isn't it? That's when it's most fun, but that's when it's not when it's most productive. So we have to turn our look inward. How have I contributed to this situation? And sometimes we have to think really long and hard to figure it out because our brain, our ego doesn't want to let us go there. But of course, when you think of other people's conflicts, you can say, yeah, mutual contributions. Both sides are gaining here and doing things that are provoking the other side. They're mutual contributions. Okay. Then the other set of conflict skills that I want to talk about are more disciplines that we can develop in our life. They're behaviors, they're actions, but they take practice. They don't just come automatically. So we have to really intentionally think about, I'm going to practice developing these particular skills. These are behaviors, are reflected in behaviors. One is empathy. And we did that little exercise last week about imagining that we were on the other side of the election outcome, not our preferred position, and how we would feel in that situation. So imagining the emotional empathy of connecting with people that are on a different side of an issue than we are, or the different side of a conflict. Self-reflection. Here, I love some of the writings of Walter Wink that some of you may be familiar with. He is a theologian and writer who was an American citizen who was writing about South Africa during apartheid, and he has a whole series of books. All of them are very good, but he talks a lot about self-reflecting on our anger and thinking about how uncomfortable we may be with other people's anger and how that affects our responses, thinking about how we respond when we're angry and really analyzing some of our motivations behind our responses. We talked a little bit about nonverbals in conflict, of trying to put your body into a position of openness. And if your arms are crossed and your legs are crossed, that is saying you are not open to receiving information from another person. So you try to take a stance, a position that is conducive to openness and communicates openness to another person. We talked about both and thinking, that rather than saying that one side is right and one side is wrong, probably there is truth on both sides of that. How do we reach that sort of understanding in our heads? How do we explore that with another person about the merits of their side of the argument and the merits of our side of the argument? Both and thinking, rather than either or. And sorry, I've got a clicking problem here. Eventually it gets there. We talked about reverse mirroring. We talked about how when somebody is angry, whatever nonverbals they're exhibiting, a good way to de-escalate is to do just the opposite. So if somebody is speaking very, very rapidly because they're very upset, we respond very slowly. If somebody is speaking very loudly, we respond very softly. If somebody is standing up, we sit down. So as long as we're in a safe place in this situation, we try to reverse mirror the non-verbals of anger in order to de-escalate the situation. We also talked about validating a person with whom we disagree. And we come back to this a little bit today, that we can validate a person and be absolutely authentic to our own convictions and values. We can validate them as a person. We can validate what they're feeling in this moment without in any way compromising our own position. So we separate the person from their position. That position that they hold is not them in their entirety, it is one aspect of them. So how do we validate the other aspects of this person? Okay, so those were our 10 things on leaning into conflict. You had a little homework assignment to try this idea of nonviolent communication. We talked about 4 easy sentences: an observation, this is what I feel, this is what I need, This is what I'm requesting for. So for example, perhaps to one of my sisters, I could say, I've seen the messages that you're sending me about the election. Observation. These messages make me feel anxious and even angry at times. That's my feeling. I need to not dwell on these messages and viral memes that you're sending out. Okay? That's my need. I need to not dwell on these messages. Request, please take me off your distribution list for election-related messages. Request. Okay, so I'm going to stop share screen at this moment and come back to you all so I can see your faces. Let's talk a little bit about conflict. Any questions that you have of those ideas of leaning into conflict, and any experiences that you had with your homework assignment? Did you try it out? Did you try this 4-sentence approach to addressing a misunderstanding or a tense situation?
I'll jump in. I practiced them almost immediately after the class last time. I practiced them with Dee Dee. And I said I did not see all those 10 points of resolving conflict. I saw some, but I didn't think I saw them all. And could she maybe put them out again at the beginning of this class, in effect? And she did that. So it worked.
I did. That was beautifully done. And you said too, how you felt that, you are, if I recall, you said, I'm a person, yes, that likes to see all of the, if you give me a list, I'm going to go down that list for find all 10 points. So very well done. Anybody else try this out?
You'll need to unmute yourself if you're wanting to speak.
I tried this with my daughter.
Yeah.
She lives in Vermont and would love for me to come at Christmas time. And given COVID, I have many misgivings about that. And I've been hesitant to raise the topic. So it's kind of, the elephant on the table that nobody talks about. But given your encouragement, I approached it and just explained to her about my feelings of anxiety and given the surge in COVID right now. And I needed to see her. That was not the question, but rather to see her in a safe place. And so my request was that we just FaceTime rather than me coming. And she said, I kind of knew this was coming. So she validated me that way. It was still a difficult conversation, but one that was very necessary. So it did work in this situation.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Jan. That is a very tough. And sometimes with these situations that are very difficult and there's a lot of emotion around them, it helps to sort of have a script, if you will, of I'm going to go from here to here to here to here, because when we're in the emotion of the moment, sometimes we don't communicate very clearly. So sometimes that can be helpful.
It reminded me of Marriage Encounter. My husband and I were Marriage Encounter presenters for several years, and we taught those steps in terms of resolving conflict between married couples.
Great example. Thank you for that. So yes, used in Marriage Encounter materials and a lot of other materials as a way to, we so often don't bring the feelings into our conversations, and we assume that somebody else is going to guess what we're feeling, particularly in intimate relationships. And I appreciate Marriage Encounter materials for really delving into that and talking about, this is how I feel. I feel this, and communicating that to partners. Anybody else? Okay, thank you for sharing those examples. Those are really helpful to see it work in different contexts. Let's continue on then today, and we're going to dive into this idea of wisdom to question and faith in uncertainty. Okay. And I use this slide from Sojourner Truth when she talks about how she got her very unusual name, right? The Lord gave me Sojourner because I was to travel up and down the land, showing the people their sins and being a sign unto them. Afterwards, I told the Lord I wanted another name because everybody else had 2 names. And the Lord gave me Truth because I was to declare the truth to people, Sojourner Truth. So I think when we think about wisdom to question and faith in uncertainty, it brings up all sorts of issues for us regarding truth. What is true? What isn't true? How is it possible that somebody else could hold a different truth than my truth? Because my truth is true, right? So how could this possibly be? So this brings up all the messiness of truth for us. I want to think a little bit and invite you to think about opening your mind to possibilities, to new possibilities. So author and poet Oliver Wendell Holmes knew this well when he said, people's minds, once stretched by a new idea, never return to their original dimensions. And a more colloquial example, I read a bumper sticker this summer, a good mind is like a parachute. It doesn't work unless it's open, right? So you never know when you're going to need some information that's passing by you at this moment. There's an old joke about a guy who parachutes out of a plane and he pulls the ripcord and the parachute doesn't open. And then he pulls the emergency cord and the parachute doesn't open, and he is plummeting fast toward the ground. And really oddly, he passes another guy partway down, and this guy's flying up from the ground. And so he yells to the guy and he says, hey, do you know anything about parachutes? No, the other guy answers, do you know anything about gas stoves? So there's your humor for today. So create for yourself an open mind, learn new things. You might approach an issue and wonder, why do I have to learn this? So why, as the future Enron banker, do I need to learn about morals in philosophy class? Why, asked a young Britney Spears, do I need to learn about marital communication? So a few years ago, I had a student in one of my classes, and we'll call her Harump, and she would come into the class with Harump as she sat down in the chair. She did not want to engage the material that we were engaging in this class. It's actually a class on alternative spiritualities, and she took issue with this. She refused to read one of the required books for the class, which was Salvation on Sand Mountain by David Covington, which is a really fun read if you haven't read that. And on a trip to University of Michigan Medical School, they had spiritual healers in from the Andes, and they were doing demonstrations and talking about their cultural traditions of spiritual healing. And she sat with her hands over her ears, rocking back and forth, refusing to listen to the presentation. So it was a difficult semester for both of us, right? We were like, okay, good riddance, you're out of my class, good luck at your Hope College presentation or your education, you're on your way, right? 3 years later, I get a letter from this student, just blew me away. I about fell off my chair. And she said, thank you so much for your class, because you challenged me to think about things and other people's experiences that I did not want to hear about. Thank you for your class. It has changed my mind. It has changed my life. And I'm now off doing all these fantastic things that she was indeed doing, and as a social justice advocate for particular groups. So this idea is that sometimes we're resistant to new information and new possibilities, but that we need to, again, lean in and open ourselves up to that, as difficult as it might be. And I've got a story for you of, this is Mama Juanita. And Mama Juanita is a spiritual healer in Hambu, Huasi in Ecuador. And I had the privilege of being able to visit her, meet her, and see her work last summer, a year ago, last summer, back in the before times when we were able to travel. And so she works at a clinic that integrates Western medicine with traditional healing, and she is a traditional healer. And so when I met Mama Juanita, she was doing a healing with a person, and she took a live guinea pig, cute little guinea pig, and she takes the guinea pig by the neck And the person was standing up and she sort of rubbed this guinea pig sort of on, but at least near the body, every inch of the body, hair, face, back, arms, hands, legs, all over the body of the person that she was healing. And she's shaking the guinea pig. Well, the guinea pig is crying. The guinea pig does not fare well in this endeavor. The guinea pig's neck is snapped clearly as part of this goes on. And then Mama Juanita, this beautiful woman, whips out this large knife from her waist and she slits open the guinea pig. She skins it. She takes the heart out. She takes the brain out. She takes the intestines out. She takes all the pieces out of the guinea pig. And she looks for illness or malformation in any of these parts in the body. And the idea is that if the person she's trying to heal has a kidney problem, she'll see something in the kidneys of the guinea pig. If the person has a heart problem, she'll see something in the heart of the guinea pig. The guinea pig will take on this malady from the person in this ritual. And she actually hits quite a lot of home runs with her diagnoses because it's in an area where the water supply is not very sanitary. And so often the guinea pig has parasites in its intestines, and man, she nails that diagnosis, but a lot of people do as well. So she does have some 100% diagnoses. So my point in all of this is that to open your mind to possibilities. Now I had two choices in this situation. It's rather disturbing to watch at all sorts of levels, right? Option one is, oh my gosh, this is animal abuse. How can I stand here and watch this guinea pig die and squeal in this process? This is ridiculous. This has no health impact whatsoever, says my rational scientific brain, right? That's one option. A second option is try to open my mind and explore and ask questions and learn what this means to somebody else, not me. So I might ask, how many people come for this treatment, Mama Juanita? Evidently a lot, including some of the other university staff that were present with me at the time, which surprised me. When do you refer to the Western medical doctor? Does the Western medical doctor refer patients to you? Can you describe a time for me when somebody was cured by your healing? I also wanted to ask, what do you have against guinea pigs? But I didn't, because I'm trying to keep an open mind here. Okay, so what I learned that traditional healing brings people into the clinic to get help. It also is a sort of gateway to getting them also to medicine, Western medicine, because they come in to see the traditional healer and they may be referred then to the Western medical doctor to get some other aspects of medicine. Also, she's gifted at her work. She plays a really important part in the health of the community. We know that health is related to both physical and spiritual healing, and she is doing that. And people are experiencing healing from her work and their faith in her and what she does. So to keep an open mind would suggest that she plays a very, very valuable role in the healing of this community. And if I had shut down my mind immediately with animal abuse, how on earth can you do this to this poor guinea pig? I would not have been able to embrace that broader understanding. Okay, so this is the idea of opening our minds to new possibilities, trying to learn from other people. One of the ways that we do this is by asking questions. Okay, good questions make the recipient feel valued. They communicate interest. They reflect good listening. They reflect a genuine desire for understanding. Those are good questions. And we'll talk about some others a little bit later on. So it should make another person feel good because you're genuinely interested in finding out, Mama Juanita, how do you do this? What do you see? Okay. Some guidelines for asking these good questions. One is to ask essential questions. So there are lots of the old adage, there's never a dumb question. Sometimes I think that perhaps there is. But so we want to get to essential questions that dig deeper, that make us think, that provoke in the other person a response that we hadn't gotten to before. So there are essential questions in different contexts. So if you are traveling to another country and you do not know the language, the one essential question, at least in my book, is where's the bathroom? That's the one thing I need to be able able to say in every language, every place I travel. Other things I can kind of get by with sign language and other things, but that one's an essential question. Okay. In psychiatry, my spouse gave me the example of the question, when was the last time when you felt reasonably well? Isn't that a great question? Instead of just focusing on the malady or how you're feeling at this moment when you're not well, let's look at what our goal is for where we're going to get you back to feeling reasonably well. Tell me about that. That's an essential question. I have students do an exercise where I say you have one question that you can ask a person who might be a potential life partner. Only one question. What's that question going to be? And they think, I got this. So they work on their questions. Then I put them in a pair to try their question out on another person. And they get an answer that is just unfulfilling, right? It doesn't give them the information that they need. And they quickly revise their questions. But one of my favorites that they came up with was, what do you like on your worst day? I like that question. That's a pretty good question to get at a sense of who you're committing your lifelong partnership with. There are many other important essential questions, but I did like that one. Avoiding why questions. There is a place for why questions, but be careful with why questions because why questions are so often nearly impossible to answer. So you might ask in a conflict or a difficult conversation, why do you feel that way? Well, how do you answer that? I don't know. I just do feel this way. How can I really dissect why I feel this way? It just is. Or why are you so defensive? I am in this context. I can't explain to you why. So why questions often just don't get us where we need to go, right? The other thing to keep in mind is to ask a single question. We have this tendency, we get a chance to ask a question and we put about 6 questions in one. So maybe our question is, why do you persist in thinking this election is fraudulent? Why can't you accept the results that you, just as you have with other US elections? Don't you think that questioning the integrity of the election system also puts the senators that you elected and support in question? And doesn't the challenging of the whole electoral process in the USA put democracy at risk? That's my question. There are like 6 questions embedded in there, right? It's impossible to answer that question. So one question, clear and concise. And then the last thing to keep in mind is open-ended questions. If I ask you, do you believe that, ... you can answer that with a yes or a no. That doesn't really get me a lot of information, right? But if I ask you, what values do you hold that lead you to this conclusion or this position? What values do you hold? That's an open-ended question. That invites conversation. That invites depth and exploration. Okay. So I've got just a funny little example for you. I hate those people who knock on your door and tell you you need to be saved or you'll burn. Stupid firefighters. It's important to ask questions, my point. Okay. How do we ask questions when we are in a situation when we disagree with another person? So often people elicit truth claims. It's true because I believe that it's true. And sometimes you get into a circle there and you really can't get out of it. Why do you believe this? It's because I believe it's true. Why do you believe this? Because I believe it's true. And you don't get anywhere. So a question that you might ask to delve deeper in that, an essential question might be, what experience have you had that led you to these beliefs? That's an open-ended question that's going to take you deeper into understanding. Okay. Another one, truth claim. It's true because we believe it. And what you want to do here is unpack who's the we? What group of people comprise the we? What are the dominant beliefs and values of this particular group? Okay. Likewise, you get they say it's true. They say ... They say ... Who are they? Who is this that's saying this? What are the dominant beliefs and values held by they? Okay, who is they? So drawing question what the sources are behind people's beliefs and attitudes. I've got a quick little clip I want to show you here that's just fun on this idea of who is they.
That sun is something. You guys want any sunscreen?
No, thanks. They say sunscreen can cause as many problems as it solves.
Yeah, we never said that.
No, not you guys. I just mean, generally, people.
But you said they say.
Yeah.
Right. We're they.
What?
When people say, they mean us.
I don't think
We're the people mean when they say they.
When they say, they say.
Right.
So when someone says, they say love is forever.
Yeah, that's us.
I remember that. We said that. It was right after Gary's divorce.
It was meant to be ironic, but people took it seriously.
How can they be just 3 of you?
Actually, there's 4 of us. There's another guy in Bolivia.
Namibia.
Right, I always get those two confused.
Yeah, we Skype with them.
Wait, hold on. What did you say they say about the sunscreen?
I said they say sunscreen can cause as many problems as it solves.
That's some.
What?
Some say that.
Different guys.
Some are different than they.
Yes.
They say some don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Wait. I just don't understand how the 3 of you could
4.
be.
Namibia.
Okay, 4 of you. How everyone can just know what you say.
We go to a lot of parties.
Okay, sure. I mean, it could spread, I guess, right? The whole 6 degrees of separation thing. What? Don't tell me you don't know that one. The 6-degree thing? They say that.
Okay, hold on a second while I get everybody back again. So this idea, just a memorable example of keeping in mind, question who they are when they say it's true. And what beliefs and values, what group people are calling to when they make a truth claim like that. Another truth claim is true because it is morally right. And sometimes that's issued, and I use for those of you who remember the church lady from Saturday Night Live, that takes you back a decade or so, maybe 2. But the idea that just stops the conversation right there. If I say it's morally right, then it's true because it's morally right, and we can't discuss this. But then the question might be, what core values that do you hold that are connected to this belief? So an essential question to dig deeper and not just to leave that on the surface, to explore that in more depth. And the last one, it's true because I've always believed it. And for this one, we need to ask, how does this belief benefit you? If this is a belief that we've always held, that it's always been that we've always believed this to be true, it probably benefits you in some particular way. Money, power, status. Imagine that this belief were not true. How would this affect you? Might be a question to ask. Okay? So if you benefit from the system, it's worthwhile to hold on to those beliefs, but not everybody may benefit in the same way from that belief that you do. Okay? So this idea of asking the right questions, if we don't ask the right question, we don't get a very satisfying answer. And I do want to take just a little bit of the time today. This is a little bit longer clip, but I just love this guy and love his story that he has to tell. This is Jerry Tello. He is the director of the National Compadres Network in San Jose and in the Southwestern United States. And we're going to talk about something in a minute after the clip called Appreciative Inquiry. The idea of exploring with questions to try to appreciate the background, the experiences that have led a person to where they are in this moment. And so the question that was asked him are, what are the traditions and values of your family or community that have helped you heal? What are the traditions and values of your community? And this is his answer. And I think he just does a beautiful job of telling this story.
My family comes from Mexico. You know, I saw a grandmother that every morning, before she did anything, she would, you know, get up real early, 4:30. I thought my grandma was crazy. Why you get up so early? But she would get up at 4:30 in the morning, and she would begin her prayer. And she would begin praying, and I would hear her in her prayer, and sometimes in her, you know, in her prayer, it sounded like a song, like a chant, like she was beginning the reverberation of her day. And she would, you know, call to those spirits. She would ask for assistance. She would, you know, beckon for blessings. And in my mind, what I began to realize what my grandma was doing is that she was, you know, connecting with that greater source, that sacredness, and that is generations old for her, because her grandmother did that, and her grandmother did that, and her grandmother. So that she was connecting with this lineage of spirit keepers, of tradition holders, of sacred messengers, and bringing to that the sacredness of her God, of her sacred creator. And then after she finished that, she would then come to where we were sleeping as children. We all slept in one room, and she would then bless us, give us a blessing, a bendición. And as a little boy, I used to hate it. Sometimes she'd wake me up early. Grandma, why are you waking me up so early, right? But can't you bless me later? Isn't God around later, you know? You know, you blessed me last night. Is it still good for right now? You know, why I need another blessing, you know? And what I didn't understand is not only the significance of that, but the impact of that. That what she was doing is connecting me to generational medicine. She was connecting me to ancestors that 7 generations ago prayed for me when I was just a dream, just a hope, that she was sending a message to me that they wanted me to know. And that message was that I was sacred, that I was a blessing, and that within the essence of who I was, that I carried a sacred purpose and a sacred responsibility to carry on that prayer, if you will, carry on that song, carry on that ritual, carry on that tradition, so that those prayers wouldn't be wasted, so that those dreams, those sacrifices, and, you know, when I think about it today, I can't even imagine, you know, what my ancestors did, what they had to sacrifice through, what pains they had to carry, and that they didn't give up, that they continued praying, they continued singing, they continued dancing, they continued forward in order that I could wake up that morning and that my grandmother would be there and somebody would bless me. But what my grandmother also understood is that she had to inoculate me. She had to medicine me up, because she knew that there were going to be times in which not only was I not going to feel like a blessing, just for how I looked and what I reflected to the society, and my skin coloration and my features, and what that reflected to people, that people weren't going to see me as a blessing. They were going to see me as the enemy. They were going to see me as a perpetrator. They were going to see me as a delinquent, as a gang member. They were going to see me as the potential person that they were going to lock up, that they were going to drug up, they were going to medicate, that they wanted to deport. She knew that she had to bless me up so that I would in my spirit, remember that song, remember that prayer, remember that wish, remember that blessing so that I wouldn't give up.
I'm going to stop right there. Gives you a sense. What I want to talk about with this is a good question. A good question that elicits that kind of story and that kind of depth and that kind of understanding of another person. I mean, it speaks to those questions that I just gave you about asking about what values do you hold that lead you to this position? What experiences have you had in your life that lead you to this position? So digging deeper into understanding another person. And there's something called appreciative inquiry. Maybe. There we go. And you can Google this, and there are books written on this, and they go into far more depth than I'm able to today. But the idea with this is to explore those very types of questions that I was showing you and rather than just assuming a truth claim that somebody claims and not exploring it to see the feelings, the values, the experiences underlying it, and particularly the feelings. So when you're in a conflict or a tense conversation with somebody, say, how are you feeling in this moment? We often don't talk about our feelings, but oh my goodness, does that help in terms of healing and connection between two people who may be in conflict or there may be tension between them to understand each other's feelings? If we focus just on the what happened situation in a conflict, it often gets us nowhere. If we can't agree on the facts, debating the facts will likely get us nowhere. Try to explore the feelings underlying the interpretation of the facts. What does this mean to this other person? So genuinely curious about what another person is experiencing around this particular issue. What gives life to this person about this particular issue? Why is it important to them? Why does it connect to them at this feeling level? That's when we're going to get somewhere. So this idea of appreciative inquiry, and again, you can go into far more depth on this, and I'm just going to touch the surface of this. This idea that you go through this process of really being curious, asking questions of another person and trying to understand them. So for example, let's say we're going to have a conversation about abortion. Oh boy, there are two diametrically opposed positions in this country on abortion right now, right? We don't even want to say the word because it draws up too many responses and everybody, how dare she go there and even bring up that word because that's a real controversy, right? But we could start with a definition, right? Let's really start with what we're talking about here. How do you define abortion? At how many weeks or do you think that life begins? How do you define the rights of the mother, the rights of the unborn child? How do you define those things? Because so often we enter into the conflict without ever establishing any understanding of each other's definitions that we're using in this conflict, right? And political pundits and politicians and the system does not go there, right? They say what the other side believes, they give the definitions, they don't spend much time exploring those definitions in order to divide people and to create divisiveness. So then we're going to go into a process of discovery. What policies regarding abortion have you celebrated? What are the things that make sense to you? What does progress on this issue look like for you? In what ways have your own life experiences intersected with these policies regarding abortion? That could tell us a lot about why somebody takes a particular position on this issue, right? If there aren't any personal experiences that you think intersect with your position on this issue, why is this important to you? Why are you passionate about this issue? That's a process of discovery. Curiosity, asking questions, share stories. Then we get to the dream part. What would it look like to you if abortion were not an issue? If this was resolved, what would that look like for you? In this country, how would we be living and engaging around these issues if this ceased to be an issue? What would that look like? We can talk about that. My dream, your dream. Okay. And then we move to that last stage, the destiny, to the design, the delivery, the final culmination. Are there areas that we could work together to realize this dream that we have? Perhaps we both want more education around sex, particularly for people when they're not married. Perhaps we both want more availability of reproductive contraceptives. Perhaps we do, as we think that that might be a way of avoiding some unwanted pregnancies. Perhaps we both want to support mothers who have made a decision to raise their babies and their children when they don't have the means to do so, and they've opted not to have an abortion. How do we support them? Perhaps we both agree that we need to do something there. Okay? So there are ways, even around one of the most divisive issues in our country, that we can explore this appreciative inquiry. And that's where I think we're going to make progress. Okay, HASP folks, are you ready for me? I'm going to throw something at you. This is a little complicated, so stick with me. This is called the Ladder of Inference. And I think it's useful. And there's a way of asking people questions going down the ladder of inference. So we go down the ladder ever so gently with people. We hold people as a sacred other person that we're helping and we're exploring together. So we're not doing this to bludgeon somebody. But what are your beliefs on this issue? So what beliefs led to your action to vote according to your position on abortion? What are your beliefs about abortion? Then we go down the ladder. What are the specific conclusions that you have drawn that gave rise to these beliefs? What are the assumptions? Is your conclusion assuming that this assumption? Is it assuming that? We're clarifying it. I'm not attacking the assumptions. I'm just clarifying. Okay. What do these facts and opinions mean to you? How have you interpreted the information, the evidence, the opinions before you? How have you put your own interpretation on that? That selected reality, what experiences have you had that inform your interpretation? And finally, you get down to what are the facts and the data that you believe are real or true? Okay, so you're taking and going with a person down the ladder of inquiry. Then there's another approach only after we have done that, because the goal of that is just, I want to understand what your position is. I want to understand how you have come to this position. Only then can we walk up the ladder. We go back up. What facts and data have you considered? Are there other facts and data out there? Are there other experiences? People may have had different experiences and arrived at different conclusions. Are there other interpretations of this data? Are there other assumptions out there that are equally valid? Are there other possible conclusions that you could have reached? Are there other beliefs that you're not considering based on those conclusions? Are there other actions and ways you could have responded to your beliefs? Okay, so we go up and down that ladder of inquiry and guides questions to dig deep into the issues so that we're not just covering the surface level. Okay, we could spend a lot of time on the ladder of inquiry, but you've got the idea about asking questions, going deeper, going deeper, going deeper in order to promote understanding. So the point that I want to make with this slide here is that there are good questions and there are bad questions. And good questions, we talked about how a good question makes the other person feel good, makes them say, you're listening to me, you're trying to understand me, you are making a good-hearted effort to try to understand where I stand on this issue that's very important to me. So going up and down that ladder of inference, yes, that's a good thing that we can do. Questions can also be used to embarrass people, to shame people, to bludgeon them with a hole in their position and show them how idiotic their position is because there's a hole in their reasoning here. Questions can be asked that are not fair, like the example of the Far Side cartoon that I have here. Okay, Jimmy, you can have that new bike if you can answer just this one question. What's the average rainfall in the Amazon basin? Oh, time's up. Sorry, that's an unfair question. And we ask unfair questions of people all the time, right? We ask questions that are not answerable. And the list goes on and on and on. So this idea of using good questions that take us deeper understanding, not the bad questions. Okay. Let's continue on, and this really kind of continuation on this idea of asking questions takes us into areas of uncertainty. It makes us feel vulnerable. So how do we have faith in uncertainty? And this idea that if we're going to engage in civility, if we're going to connect with people who are on other sides of issues than we are, we have to have some faith in uncertainty, because it is uncertainty provoking. So things that we've been defining throughout our previous weeks of this series are going to put you in a position of uncertainty. They just are. So in the first week, we talked about speaking truth. Well, your question may be, well, how will others react if I speak my truth? And if I listen to other people's truths, what will happen to my certainty? I can't listen. I can't even hear their side of the issue. Week 2, we talked about loving ourselves and being in relation with people who differ from me. But that makes me incredibly vulnerable. That puts me in a place of uncertainty because I can't predict and explain and understand these people that you're asking me to engage. Last week, when we talked about conflict, that challenges our capital T truth, doesn't it? By learning about other people's truths that they hold. And you're telling me that civility requires me to embrace uncertainty? Will that change who I am? But we have to look at faith as the opposite of certitude. And we're ready for this, to say that we hold our convictions and we are strong in our convictions, but we also realize we don't know absolutely everything. And we certainly don't know other people's experiences. So I give the example of India is a country that creates a lot of uncertainty for me. It turns my perceptions of explaining and predicting what's going to happen, that's completely upside down. So a number of years ago, my daughter was studying in India, and we went over as a family at Christmas time, and we took an overnight train to Varanasi. And Varanasi is the city on the Ganges where people take their loved ones, their family members, to be cremated on the side of the river, and then the ashes are thrown into the river. And so we had reserved a sleeper car on this train for our overnight journey, and we arrive on the sleeper car, and there are, I kid you not, 23 people already packed into the floor and the 4 sleeper bunks that we thought were our own. And it became very clear these people were not going to move. It didn't matter. We waved our tickets. They looked at us, right? They were not moving. So we like squished our bodies to try to like squish a place into a seat. We're sitting up or holding our luggage in our lap. I've got a woman sleeping on my legs with her young child sleeping on top of her. I mean, we are packed into the same like sardines. It was a very long, uncomfortable night. And oddly enough, there was one bunk of the 4 bunks that we were supposed to have reserved for us. There's one bunk, and there's a guy laid out there having a full night's sleep, completely undisturbed by this crowded, and nobody's bothering him and crowding into his bunk. And he's lying out, and he's got a blanket over him and one socked foot sticking out from underneath the blanket. And he seems to have slept very peacefully for the entire night. So we arrive in Varanasi early in the morning, and we're just like sitting back and letting the Volkswagen unpack, right? Letting all these people out of the train car and grab their stuff so that we can move. And we're just sitting back waiting for them to exit the train car. This guy is still here sleeping blissfully. Then 4 people come back into the car, and they pick up the guy on their shoulders and they march him out of the train car. And we realize that he was deceased. And they were bringing him as a family member to Varanasi for cremation and for his ashes to go into the river Ganges. And we realized that, yeah, he got his, like, hey, Dad, let's take a trip. You'll get that berth that you always wanted with the full bunk that you can spread out and lay out all by yourself, because nobody was crouching on his space on that bunk, because I think the rest of the train car knew who was in that bunk. So that turns my idea of certainty, prediction, explanation, behavior completely upside down, right? So we have to like lean in to this uncertainty. We have to find a degree of comfort with that. So I want to take a minute with you. I'm going to stop the screen share for a minute and come back to you as a group. And let's talk just a little bit about uncertainty and faith in uncertainty. So there are individual differences in people's degree to which you're comfortable with uncertainty. And let's talk about this a little bit. Just in general terms, anybody have an example to share? Do you think you are as a person or a person that like, wow, I can just take it as it comes. I enjoy being in this sort of sense of uncertainty. Sometimes I find that exhilarating, or, oh my goodness, I need to have things controlled, prescribed. I need to know exactly what to expect in any given moment. Anybody want to share an example?
I don't know of an example, but I do affirm the value of uncertainty. As soon as you become certain, you lock yourself from the possibility of changing your mind or growing or learning new things.
Exactly. Thank you, Judy. Very, very true. But we love our certitude, don't we? We cling to it. Anybody else have any thoughts on that? Yeah.
Andre, I'm not sure that it's what you're looking for, but I found when I moved to Holland and I came from the Detroit area, that in a large metropolitan area, you could encounter people that didn't agree with you. And because of the largeness, you could escape them if you, but once I came to Holland and you ran into the same people all the time at Myers, at the gas station, whatever, and you became friends, but then you learned that they didn't have the same values you had, but you couldn't lose them. And it became very uncomfortable because you couldn't hide from it.
Great example. Anyone else? And I think Andre's example too is a good example of community and building skills about being in community. And if you think about, I grew up in a small town in rural Iowa, and you had to get along with the people in that town across different opinions and differences because you were stuck together and there was nobody else, right? You had 7,000 people in the whole town. That was your community. You had to figure it out. And I think there are ways in which social media has made it very easy for us to choose our own communities of like-minded people and defriend and to push people who have other experiences, other positions, other perspectives, other values out of our community. And I worry that we may lose the ability to engage community and figure out how to work together across differences when we can so easily just, I'm going to defriend that person, I'm going to defriend that person, I'm going to defriend that person. I don't have to practice those skills of really engaging in a diverse community because I hang out with people on social media who are just like me. And that's not real community.
Yeah, I think that when you run across people who don't share the same values, it makes for a very interesting conversation. I wouldn't want to run from that. I would want to learn more about it. And they may never convert me or me them, but I just think it's interesting to talk to people. If you talk to just the same kind of people, that's pretty boring.
Yeah. Thank you, Bill. So true. And we don't learn. We don't learn. It's just an echo chamber that we live in. And social media in particular has given us a great opportunity to really close off our echo chambers so that we're just in the echo chamber and we're not encountering other positions. Let me go back to share screen. Sometimes I lose my commands on the bottom of the screen. Bear with me for just a moment.
That's called living with uncertainty.
It is. It is indeed. What happened? I am indeed in uncertainty in this moment because I can't get my control bar back. I can see all of you, which is lovely, but why?
We're seeing your PowerPoint program.
You are. I'm still on shared screen. We're all good then. Okay. course, it would help if I could also see my PowerPoint. Maybe that's too much to ask. Okay. So this idea of faith and uncertainty, leaning into our uncertainty. So when does this come up? We cling to our truth so tenaciously, and sometimes we're in positions where our truths no longer explain and predict in the way that they have in the past. So a 5-hour plane ride can change the predictive ability of my truth that a guinea pig is a pet. It's a child's pet. And a 5-hour plane ride, I'm in a country where guinea pig is dinner. My truths no longer explain and predict about something as simple as guinea pigs. We also have to recognize that our truths are not adopted by everyone. So is a mythology true? By definition, a mythology is not true. But your theology is someone else's mythology. Is my theology someone else's mythology? Is my mythology someone else's theology? What is truth in that? So when we decide that which is true, my point here is separating true and truth. So can I believe that something is not true, but yet I can acknowledge that it has truth? It has power, it has meaning, and perhaps not for me, but perhaps for other people. So let me give you an example of this. This is a picture of a funeral pyre from Indonesia. And in Indonesia, the dead are cremated on a pyre on the beach, and the family and friends gather around funeral pyre. Family and friends gather around to witness the burning. And when the fire reaches this high enough temperature, there's a loud pop when the skull cracks. And many Indonesians believe that this is the sound of the soul leaving the body. And there's a tension, there's a waiting for the pop, and then a sort of communal release of grief and relief and closure as the spirit leaves the body. Now, do I believe that it's true that the soul makes a pop when it leaves the body? No, I don't. But I do believe that it's true that mourners experience a release of grief and a faith in the holy transcendence of life over death, spirit over body, resurrection, and the promise of reunion to come when that skull pops. Yes, I believe in the impact of the belief, but not the belief itself, even though the belief is the foundational cause of the impact. So truth gets very, very complicated. And I think part of opening our minds is recognizing that there is truth in fiction, right? You expand your learning of truths. And we recognize the complexities of what is true and what is not true. We leave the land of certitude and enter into that murky, dim place of uncertainty. So there can be truth that emerges from fiction. There can be truths that can be discovered in something, even if we believe that it is not true. Okay. Messy. So this idea of opening our minds to possibility and recognizing, one, that our truths may be wrong, and having the humility to recognize that. Our truths may be overgeneralized. They may not apply to every situation and every group of people. Our truths may be convenient for us, and they may make us feel really comfortable. And our truths are most likely a product of our social position, our experience, our culture, our identities, our experience, and it's an outcome of that. So this idea of being open-minded and embracing, leaning into uncertainty in order to engage civility is our purpose, is to replace dualistic thinking, this either-or thinking, that there's one answer, that we hold this with certitude, that we take a side, that we make quick judgments about the other side, to one of dialectical thinking. And dialectical thinking is this idea of engaging both and are probably true. There are part of what I think is true and probably part of what this other person thinks are true. Recognizing that there are multiple perspectives and experiences that lead to different beliefs about what is true. That there's truth to be found even in stories that are not literally true. So the example of the Indonesian skull popping, that there is humility in our knowing, that we are constant lifelong learners, and that rather than reverting to, regressing perhaps to our certitude, that we're entertaining new ideas, that we're engaging in curiosity. So this idea of dialectical thinking, both and, seeing both sides, multi-partiality, if you will, helps us to see our own weaknesses in our own arguments and the strengths in another person's arguments. And so two excellent questions to ask in these conversations in order to cultivate civility is, what is the strongest part of your argument? Tell me what the strongest part of your argument is, and people are most ready to do that. And then tell me, what is the weakest part of my argument, in your opinion? What is the weakest part of my argument? And being open to that information. Okay? So this idea of providing feedback is a source of knowledge and a source of, again, moving beyond certitude to taking in and expanding the knowledge with which we come to our understandings. And James Baldwin has a wonderful quote on how he loves America, but he insists on the right to criticize her perpetually. And someone else that was involved in our series here the last couple of weeks sent me an email with this one from Al Franken, a former senator from Minnesota. Conservatives love America like a toddler loves their mommy. It can do no wrong. Liberals love America like a parent loves a teenager. They know they can do better. And in some ways, you see this played out in the most recent election and the political rhetoric of both sides, that Democrats do not love America because they're being critical. And I don't want to see our history that way. We're pointing where all the things that we did was wrong. How can they undermine America in this way? So let's have a summary here, and then we'll go to an open discussion. So we talked about the wisdom to ask questions, to challenge, the wisdom to open our minds to new possibilities, the wisdom to ask questions that do not bludgeon another person, that I've talked about specific types of questions that build other people up, that empower other people. We talked about this idea of appreciative inquiry, of exploring the feelings, exploring values, going through this process of really, and the ladder of inference would be another example of that too, a process of systematically kind of unpacking what it is that we think and why we think that way, and a way of also understanding what another person thinks and why they think that way. We've talked about faith in uncertainty, of leaning into uncertainty and recognizing that our truth may no longer explain and predict what it did in the past, that we have to open ourselves to possibilities. We have to seek others' feedback in order to expand our thinking. We recognize that what may not be true may have some truth to it, underlying truth that we can derive even if something is not literally true. That idea of both and thinking, that dialectical thinking, realizing that our truths are not shared by everybody else. What's true to us may not be true to somebody else, and that we seek to find shared truths across those differences. And to recognize, particularly in the current age that we are in, I feel sometimes like truth and the facts got a divorce. They forgot to tell us they're living in separate households and they're not talking to each other anymore. But so a way to lean into that current situation that we find ourselves in is to try to see the weaknesses in our own position and to try to recognize and explore the strengths in someone else's position. So your homework for next week is to play a little bit with this idea of appreciative inquiry. Okay, so find an opportunity to really ask another person what they're feeling in this moment, in this situation, around a particular issue or situation. Explore those feelings more than the facts, if you will. Try to explore the emotional impact. Be genuinely curious. Try to ask questions. What gives life to this person in this experience or around this issue? What connects this person to this experience or this issue? So play around with that idea of appreciative inquiry, seeing if you can work that into a conversation. And before we go to questions, I'll just leave you with a quote from Rilke, from the wisdom to, that I think speaks very well to the wisdom to question and faith in uncertainty. And he writes, quote, "Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books that are now written in a very foreign language. Do not now seek the answers, which cannot be given you because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps then someday, far in the future, you will gradually, without even noticing it, live your way into the answer." So I am going to see if I can stop sharing. If I can find the right buttons. Hey, and I found you all again. Very good. What would you like to talk about today from the things that we've talked about?
So this is Bob Kenny, and I'm just overwhelmed with all the wonderful information, and it'll take a while to integrate and remember. I'm writing notes furiously, but the thing that strikes me today really strongly is we use the word we use the word truth. And it's not, for me, it's not the right word. The right word is belief. We all have our beliefs for all these numbers of reasons, and we've chosen to use the word truth because that makes it more important, more strong. And as long as we use the word truth, we will never, I shouldn't say never, it'll be extremely difficult to bridge that divide. If I have a conversation with my neighbor and this is what I believe and that's what he believes, and we had a conversation on abortion and it was just as you said it would be, how many months we had that conversation, and we had such a big difference in what the law is today. So I had my truth of what it was, and he had his truth, and they were drastically different. And we had to go on Google. We had to stop our conversation and go to Google to carry on. So it's just, I need to let go of the word truth, because my truth, it's just my belief.
Yeah.
So I'll leave it at that. But thank you. It's been wonderful.
I wanted to add a comment about uncertainty. And, the information, I wish I took this course a year ago, so that it wouldn't feel like there's so much uncertainty that it seems to have people locked into, in the uncertainty, I'm going to hold on to what I believe or as truth. So there's so much triggering that happens that, I'm nervous about approaching even family members at this particular point in time, because I think this is a universal uncertainty. It's not just individual. So there's a little trepidation there, so I too am taking notes, and there will be, it is seeping in, but I don't know that I can approach it right now.
We live in a very complicated time. 10 years ago in academia, every course, every discipline was struggling with this idea of postmodernism, right? What postmodernism was. And in a nutshell, it was presaging that we were entering a time when truth was relative, that truth was an individual's personal experience and their perception of the world, and that there were different truths, and it was completely open to interpretation. This kind of rocked the academic world and turned things upside down, right? Because we always relied on truth and evidence and authority of belief, that there were certain things that we held to be true because they were backed by evidence, whether scientific experiment or other of the wisdom of the ages, that there were truths. And what amazes me right now is that nobody is talking about this. It sort of went out of vogue, I guess, but we're here, we're living it. So in an earlier time, in my parents' generation, there was a truth that was delivered down to a community that said, this is what truth is. And I don't think it was accurate. It didn't reflect everybody's truth, but those in authority kind of dictated, constructed a truth, and everybody lived within that. And there was a degree of comfort in that certitude. And now we've realized, that doesn't work. And I don't think it does, but we haven't figured out how to live within. Once we've deconstructed the barn is in pieces, and I don't think we know how to live with the barn, and we don't know how to put it back together again. So we're in this era of, and I see it in the writing of students' papers where they will, well, I believe this to be true, so I really don't need any evidence for that, because I believe it. And so you have to honor that this is my belief, this is my opinion, and give me an A, because isn't this a grand opinion? And I will say it has no evidence. You have no evidence. You've cited no evidence to support your opinion, but it's my opinion, it's my belief. And so it's equally valid to every other opinion out there. So we're really struggling with this belief, truth, whose belief, whose truth. And you're right, I think truth has become so convoluted and complicated that the word becomes meaningless at this point.
I wrote a freshman paper at Hope College, and it described a fictional presentation of what was going on in my own mind. And that is a teenager going to a pastor and asking some really deep questions and hoping to get some affirmative and authoritative answers. And the minister said, I really don't have the answer to this either. It was a kind of live into the questions approach. And I found it totally unsatisfactory and expressed that in my paper. But that was my stage of thinking at the time. And I was looking for authorities to give me the truth. And it was only through going through higher education and doing research and that kind of thing, and realizing that you do need evidence to support what you believe are facts and what is truth. You write term papers and you cite sources rather than they say or we think. And it was a life experience that has brought me to where I am right now, where I am very comfortable with uncertainties and living in so-called ambiguities. It's a maturing process, and you can look back in history too. In the Middle Ages, people were looking to the church, to certain authorities to settle things for them. And they had a so-called battle of the books between the ancients and the moderns about who was right about certain things. And it was only after we get the Renaissance and we get to the Enlightenment that we realize we get the scientific method. And historically, it works out the same way as it does personally. Ontogeny replicates phylogeny or whatever.
Yeah.
So far.
Thank you, Judy. So very true.
I would say, especially to Bob and Louise, who brought up a very good point, that I believe it's my worldview that there is truth, but I may never know that truth, and I may believe something that is true, but it's really not true. But I think there is truth, and I think that's an important thing that I think we're built by our Creator to seek the truth and want to know the truth, and that sometimes we find it, sometimes we don't. But I just think that there are not multiple truths. There's one truth, and I may not ever know it, but I'm going to try to find it.
And Aristotle writes about that, doesn't he? That the truth is kind of beyond the veil. It's just out of sight. But Aristotle would agree with you, Bill. It does exist. There is a sort of absolute truth, absolute essence of everything, the perfection, but we can't see it, and we get glimmers of it. And partial knowledge and partial understanding, but we can't see the whole picture.
I was going back to Judy, right? The last person. Yeah. Going back to something that Judy said just made me think about this. You know, I was a library media specialist, and if you go to the schools now, there is, in most K-12 schools, they are now kind of extinct in the workplace, and which I feel is a real disservice to kids because they are not learning how to show evidence for their beliefs. They're not learning how to do that. And I think when they eliminated my job 7 years ago, I think that it was primarily because of a lack of funding in the district. But there was, I believe, a false belief that teachers would have time to do that part of the job as well, which I don't think they do because there's so many demands on teachers' time and so many things that they're supposed to teach that they really don't have time to bring that aspect in the way that it should be brought in. And that was kind of my job. But I think a lot of the problems that you're seeing now, and when you were talking about the way that your kids are writing, is because they haven't learned the importance of showing evidence for what they're writing and learning how to discern something that's biased, non-biased. All things that I did as a library media specialist are not now being covered for the most part in schools.
Thank you.
Critical thinking skills.
Yeah, those are, I mean, they're just lacking in the way that kids are being taught today, which makes me really sad.
And I think it's confounded also by information literacy. And we haven't figured this out yet. So how, with all of this information that is doubling and tripling, and it's exponentially by minutes, by days that we have access to, and we don't know how to discern what is valid information and what is invalid. We don't know the motives, we don't know the sources of the information, we don't know the evidence that's been used underlying that belief before it's out there on social media. So the amount of information has increased exponentially in terms of what people have available, but the ability to discern the value and integrity of the information, we don't know how to do that yet. We just don't know how to do it. We don't know how to teach it. We're not teaching it. And meanwhile, the information is expanding and expanding and expanding. Sorry, that sounds very pessimistic, doesn't it? But I resonate with what you're saying.
I think there was a time that was being taught. However, I know that in the 16 years that I worked as a library media specialist, I was doing that. I was trying to teach those skills. But then when the schools eliminated those positions, then it's now not being taught. And I just think that was a real disservice to everybody, to the kids, to the teachers, to education in general.
Yeah. Thank you. Other burning questions or comments or things that you want to share?
I think that truth is something is dependent upon situation.
Yeah.
And it varies with situation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's true it's sunshine out today. That's the situation. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be sunny every day. But truth right now.
Very true. And it doesn't mean it's going to be sunny someplace else. It may be raining in Florida or Honduras, right? So it's situational.
The sun is always shining. There's just clouds that get in the way sometimes.
Very true. There is one truth there. The sun is still there. Oops, Jan, can you unmute?
Jan, you're speaking, but could you unmute yourself so we can hear you? Ah, good.
One quick example. I didn't realize how often I said, I wonder, until my grandson stayed with me for a couple of weeks. And I have been given Alexa. And every time I said, I wonder, Parker would say, Alexa. It's just a quick response without having to, my language is always chew it and analyze it and say, well, how do I think about this? And what are the facts? And, oh, and Alexa's talking to me right now.
And how to say exactly what you mean without going through that infamous why choose to be online now?
And her question is, why do you choose to know right now? What the heck? I am going to mute.
The machines are taking over, Jan. They're taking us over.
Try asking her what is truth.
Yeah. We're all going to go try that as soon as we go offline. What is truth, Alexa? Any other comments? And if not, we are almost out of time. Probably have time for one more. We've got a.
Well, this is the time to say thank you, Deidre.
All right. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, do we have one more class, or is
Yes,
this...
we do.
I
We
was
do.
going to say, I don't feel like this is the wrap, because we would need to give you a much greater round of applause if this were the final class.
Right. Next week is Hope to Reconcile and Liberality to Act.
Yes.
Okay, we've got our work cut out for us for next week. I will see you then.
We appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody have a wonderful day.